Hey everybody, it's 𝗏cie𝗰𝗶, and we are here at Camelback Ranch for White Sox spring training. And you know, every year at spring training, it is a podcast palooza as we bang out 3, 4, 5 podcasts a week. And we're going to be doing that once again this year with a ton of great guests. And you know, we're likely going to hit the 1000th episode of the podcast while I'm down here. We might need to throw a little bit of a podcast party when that happens. Okay, so Chris Getz spoke with the media here on Tuesday. The players and new manager 𝗏𝗏 will speak when spring training officially begins on Wednesday. But in the meantime, today on the podcast, we have James Fegan of Sox Machine, one of the best beat writers in the business, and I have 10 burning questions for James, like who's going to be the White Sox infield on opening day? Who's going to be the closer? Will Luis Robert Jr. be traded during spring training? Who's the prospect who's going to have the biggest impact this year? The player no one's talking about right now, but will at the end of camp. How many wins the White Sox will have, and so much more. So we begin our spring training here, 2025, with James Fegan and these 10 burning questions and some burning answers coming your way. Let's do it. Okay, spring training is here, and with me here on the podcast, it is the one and only James Fegan from Sox Machine. How you doing, James Fegan?
I'm doing great. It's 70 here. I'm thirsty all the time, but otherwise, I can't complain.
For those of you watching on YouTube or on our channel at CHSN, this is the best-looking podcast we're going to have maybe all spring, maybe all year, because Jeff Corbett, our photographer, has placed us literally on the warning track at Camelback Ranch, and we see this beautiful ballpark behind us. So we want to make you, James.
I thought
Fegan,
you were just talking about the two of us.
No, look as good as possible,
podcast.
and me as good as possible. So thank you, Jeff Corbett, for doing the Lord's work here as we start spring training. And before I even begin, because there's a lot to talk about, Sox Machine, if you want to hear James, you want to read his stuff, subscribe to Sox Machine. You guys do such a great job, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson. So I thank you for coming on my podcast to talk about the White Sox here.
Yeah, we had to go through a lot of exclusivity deals to get this done, but you know, just
lawyers were involved.
Yeah,
it took weeks to make this happen, but here we are. And are you describe your emotions, James, as we begin camp? What do you think about this team coming off 121 losses?
I think they have to be better. I don't necessarily see wow, they've made such huge strides and improvements. They're clearly going to be so much more talented in the Major League roster, but I think people should, if there's something they should remember about last year, it's that so many things had to go wrong at the same time in a way that I feel like just can't be repeated, even if there weren't, coaching staff changes, organizational changes. I think you could play last season over again 50 times and it wouldn't be, none of the other 49 would be as bad as that was.
Interesting. What could have been the greatest season that team could have had in terms of wins and losses?
I think Corby and I were talking about this before, but an average defense, which is what they kind of aspired to be, even above average defense, it's probably a run-of-the-mill, high 90s, low 100s loss team. We knew they couldn't hit. We knew that, they were going to have little pitching, and what they had, they'd probably trade away. But I think defense really took the bottom out of that, and that's something that you feel like. Also, base running too. They weren't a great base running team.
What were they good at? What were they good at?
They weren't good at anything. They lost 121 games, Chuck. But there are a lot of things that you think in terms of team culture or attention to detail that they were not good at, that you would think that could improve with a new manager, with a new staff, with a new focus.
You know what they were good at? Losing games.
They were artisans of it. They creative. They never repeated the same way any given night. It was inventive. It was like a kaleidoscope.
Okay, well, here we are. It is thankfully not 2024 anymore. It is 2025. And James, I have not just 10 questions. I've got 10 burning questions about the White Sox as we start spring training. Are you ready for these 10 questions?
One of my personal hobby horses got kind of took a blow during Getz's briefing this morning, but Brian Ramos dealing with elbow soreness.
Yes.
He was kind of like a big guy I felt was overlooked reading prospect rankings this year, but now if he's not free-to-play defense at the start of spring, it obviously could harm some of his avenues to making the team.
Yeah, an elbow injury. Well, I don't know. We don't know the extent of it, but it sounds like he's going to be at least hitting in the beginning, and maybe he's ready for spring or for opening day, but we don't know, right?
Right. It's just that he's competing for a third base spot. He was trying to work on the outfield at the end of last season. Does that slow him down? Does that make it harder for him to make a roster spot, knowing where you can put him out defensively?
Okay, which leads us to the first question, which is not how many. The question is this: who will be in the infield, the starting infield for the White Sox on opening day? I mean, how many players are in the running? 10? 12?
Yeah, at least. Nominally, it's definitely double digits. Like, who's truly competing up there? It's probably still 7 or 8. What I was going to say is I think Ramos is going to be the third baseman, but now I'm not as sure. So with a lot of the guys who are trying out, Brooks Baldwin, 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶𝗹 those are guys who have minor league options left. So making the opening day team is not necessarily the only way you find out what they have this year in Chicago. So with guys like Miguel Vargas, Lenny and Sosa, they are out of options this spring. So you would kind of think if they really show well in spring, maybe a tie kind of goes to them a little bit in terms of wanting to see what they can do. Even this is going to be a year where there's going to be a lot of change, a lot of turnover, a lot of guys coming from Charlotte all year. Maybe that can tilt the balance of some of those races. So if you're telling me Ramos has slowed the start of spring, then maybe I'm leaning Miguel Vargas a little bit more at third base. That's the position he's been working out at. That's a guy they traded for. That's a guy who added a bunch of strength this offseason because the White Sox told him to do it. The way he closed last year, you'd want to see what he has at some point. And if he has a terrible spring and really doesn't look like he deserves to make the team, maybe you got to do what you got to do. And he's submitted to waivers, but I think they would probably lean towards wanting to see what Miguel Vargas has. So I'll put him at third base.
He's at third base. Miguel Vargas.
I think the shortstop race is really designed for Colson Montgomery to win. You have other options. Mydroth, Brooks Baldwin, those guys can.
𝗗cie𝗰𝗶𝗹
is back. Who can play shortstop.
Sosa can play shortstop.
He went to winter ball. He wanted to work on playing shortstop again. I don't think any of those guys are envisioned as 5 years from now, this will be our everyday shortstop. Brooks Baldwin's proved people wrong to get here. He could prove us wrong again. But Montgomery's the guy that they really want to be there. So if they're giving him a full shot to make the team this spring, if he plays really well, I think it's kind of set up for him to take it. And, he played really well the last month of the season. He had a really good AFL. He really believes in what he's doing now. The way they talk about what they do with his swing makes sense. We'll see if it works.
James, are you going Colson Montgomery?
I'm going to go Colson Montgomery.
Going Colson Montgomery. It just seems, even though I agree with everything that you just said, they want him to win the job.
Right.
Will he be ready to steal, if you want to say,
after
win the job?
After nothing went right last year,
yes.
Let's start saying the one, and my thing didn't go right already this morning. Let's put something going right with Colson Montgomery.
Let me just say, I would love for that to happen. If he has a good spring and he makes the opening day roster, that is awesome for all parties involved because he has what it takes to be like a franchise player.
That's 30% of our spring training content,
yes,
set if
right.
that happens. We don't have to worry, but we're just writing about Colson all the time.
Second base.
That one's a bit more complicated.
That could be 12 guys.
It could be 12 guys. It's certainly a bunch of guys that could start in Charlotte and then get 300, 400 at bats on the team. I'm going to zigzagging away and go Brooks Baldwin. He was pretty healthy at the end of last year. He was taking BP, so I don't think the wrist thing is going to carry over. He's someone who performed really well in the minors. He's someone I think they really like and has kind of proven himself to the organization. I don't know if second base is what he does long term. I think probably it's you say Ben Zobrist every time a guy plays more than two positions, but I think he's a guy who probably has a lot of value for a winning team playing all over. But I see some scenario where he just plays really well this next 6 weeks and is your opening day second baseman.
So what happens with 𝗗cie𝗰𝗶𝗹? What happens with Brandon Drury, who's kind of sneaky in this whole scenario?
Now I want to switch and say Drury.
Yeah,
I forgot about him a little bit.
I would go Brandon Drury at second base because at least we know he's got a proven track record. He had a terrible year in 2024, but 2022 Silver Slugger, 2023
26 home runs.
26 home runs. And have you noticed the connection with all these former Angels coaches that are on this team?
And now former White Sox going to the Angels. They got like this like two-way pipeline going between these. Way easier for them to change teams than it is to actually drive that spring training complex. I'll tell you that.
So you're going Brandon Drury.
No, you convinced me, Chuck.
I convinced you.
You tampered with your sample, but yes, Brandon Drury.
Okay, Brandon Drury, and then first base.
Andrew Vaughn.
Andrew Vaughn seems safe.
I don't know if he's making as much money as anybody here. I think he's good for first base.
Okay, let's move on. We could have done a whole podcast literally on that first topic. Opening day starter. I think I know what your answer is going to be.
You do?
I think I do. Let me hear.
I'd lean Martin Perez.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's like, we've now talked to him once, and the reputation precedes him as like the clubhouse guy, the guy they want to kind of lead their rotation and be an example. I think going out there and handling that pressure situation, which he's pitched in before, I think that's something that I think fits for them. Might be a little early to kind of drop that on Jonathan Cannon's shoulders. But he's someone who certainly, in terms of the innings he logged and how well he pitched, I think would probably be the leader of the young group. But I think Perez going out there makes sense.
And I've noticed a lot of free agent starters still available. Jose Quintana, Chris Flexen, Jacob Junis, John Means, Lance Lynn, who apparently might want to go to the bullpen. I don't know if he's a good match coming back. But
I'd find that surprising.
Yeah. So do you feel like there might be a free agent starter added here at spring training, just because some of these guys, they got to go somewhere, and I know there's 30 teams, but this would seem like would fit into the White Sox budget to get a guy who's like a Flexen or a Quintana, who it's spring, they were looking for a place to play, and they get some innings here.
I think it makes sense as an investment. I think they could view a situation where you flip them pretty easily. Certainly someone like Quintana, who has kind of track record of just being a stable innings eater. At least when I asked about it, or where they've talked about other more moves in, it doesn't seem like they're leaning that way. But I think if something slips into their budget line, which we know has been pretty narrow watching the offseason play out, but I could see it happening. I would lean no, just because they've talked about this is our group, but Kai Busch, one of their depth options, is not going to be available in the season. And
Chris Getz announcing he needed Tommy John surgery,
right,
or is going to need it.
So that I don't think that's somebody in your opening day rotation, but certainly part of your group that you probably expect to make starts this year. So yeah, I think it's possible. I'd lean unlikely. I'm not necessarily hedging my Martin Perez prediction on it, but sure. I mean they've made a lot of deals throughout spring under this new administration, so it would be in kind.
Yeah, I could see spring training unfolding, and they're seeing how these starters are doing, and they might realize, you know what, they might need another guy, and one of these guys could come here. All right, next question. This is a question I actually asked Chris Getz, and it's about the White Sox closing situation. Who is going to be the closer on this team? Getz just said we have a bunch of candidates. I didn't get really much of a definitive answer there.
Yeah, it's kind of I think it's pretty hard to say now. Who maybe it's easier. Right now, probably objectively, Justin Anderson is the most experienced as a closer. It was
not much
6-7 years ago when he was really like a team's closer per se. I think 𝗵𝗹 certainly has the stuff for it. It's kind of, you need to see probably another step forward in control this spring to really feel confident, and maybe it's something that he was really kind of in the woods for a lot of last year, and we really saw him come on late. So I think there's a lot of guys where maybe they figure out something control-wise mid-season, and they take that step where it's really all right, we feel like we do have a late inning option, but we don't really feel that way until August or September. Certainly among there's not a ton of high minors relief guys, but I think the leader among them, and somebody who pitched really well in leverage for the Barons last year, is Peyton Pallett, obviously, who's in spring. I think it's a lot to put on him right now. I don't know if he's even really a good bet to make the team right now, but that's someone who's very athletic, sitting high 90s, and really just kind of getting to this relief role, so we could see him pop in a way that he was only starting to at the end of this last year. There's
been a lot of buzz on Peyton Pallett, so I think he's a guy definitely for White Sox fans to watch during spring training, and we'll see if he could grow into the closer role. All right, we are at burning question number 4. This is a scorching hot question. It's on a lot of people's minds. Will Luis Robert Jr. be traded during spring training?
It certainly could happen. They've shown what they've willing to do before. I think it's unlikely. I think that the best offers that they got out weren't really people that I think matched Luis's potential. I think if you looked in terms of the upside of the offers they got from teams like the Reds and the Giants versus like what you feel like the upside could be if Luis plays at his capabilities, I think they're pretty far out of line, and I don't see that gulf really being bridged over the course of the next 6-7 weeks. But we know they're trying to deal their assets. It's trying to load their system. It's what they're waiting for. So I know like if the offer pops onto their desk tomorrow, Chris Getz is not going to be like, well, I don't want to disrupt the rhythm of my team. He's going to make the deal.
Yeah.
So it certainly could happen any moment. I'm going to lean no because I think there's just a bridge between what we know Luis can do if he's healthy and he's right and what he's currently being valued at. And I think they're going to want to really try to let him play out and hopefully have a situation like they had with Garrett Crochet where the value in July is nowhere near where it was in March, and they benefit from it because I think they're in a position organization-wide where they should be trying to take these big swings when they can. And I think betting on Luis being good and having a healthy season, that's a big swing they could take that could really bring a lot of value in.
Okay, here's another question. Can you close the airport nearby, that all the planes that are flying over us? Normally we hear planes, but we're getting a lot. There must be some kind of practice going on here today that normally does not occur.
I know airport regulation is changing in a lot of ways, but I don't think yet it's private citizens can walk up and close airports. We'll see. It is.
James,
we're in Arizona.
Yeah, we are in Arizona. And James, I think very highly of you. I think you have the ability to go over to that airport nearby and just close it down. We're doing a podcast here.
I mean, I've never really tested the limits of how much respect my BBWA credential earns, but
yeah, you do that with that credential, which is in your pocket right now. You could go over there and say, "Hey, I'm shutting this down."
I feel like I haven't tested its limits fully, and this is how you learn.
Okay, it's just these planes just keep circling us. But you know what? All of you listening to the podcast, just put it out of your mind.
They're circling the best-looking podcast.
Yeah, I know. We have the best-looking podcast because of our photographer, Jeff Corbett, and we have the worst pilots in the area. Okay. Most intriguing non-roster invitee. We may have already said his name.
Sure.
Or do you have someone else in mind?
Well, I didn't have him in mind, but then he reminded me of him and was like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who's, won a Silver Slugger and hit 26 home runs and just had one bad year with a lot of injuries. Mm-hmm. He definitely could easily be, the best performer. I think outside of that, like maybe probably an easier thing to call it is like Hagen Smith because he's a top prospect.
Okay,
that's
okay. That is a non-roster invitee.
We saw him pitch professionally like very little last year. He wasn't probably at full bore or top velocity. I think this is someone whose stuff is supposed to be like kind of jump off the page really good and coming out of like a really funky angle. Maybe not as funky as like Noah Schultz looks, but I think it'll be exciting to see how it plays against big league hitters. In the same vein, like Brady Montgomery has literally not played professional baseball. Like I'm someone who's really into minor league data. I don't have any on him. It's all just like watching video and trying to see like how good it's going to be, talking to people. How much playing time we really see him in, if we're going to see him just hit against other people wearing, 80s and 90s, I don't know. But just getting a look at him, obviously, would be big. I think, I don't know if it's necessarily most strategy or, entertainment value, but certainly with the organization where it is right now, having a chance to see the top prospects in this environment is kind of exciting. And, maybe something you don't get when you're trying to win a division. So
yeah, that's what I'm
good that we're getting this.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Is just all these prospects. There's so many of them that are in Major League camp for the first whatever it's going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So to be able to watch them play against the Dodgers, the Cubs, etc. That's what I'm looking forward to for sure. Okay, I don't know what number this is, but it might be number 5 or 6 of our questions. We're at 6. We are at 6. Thank you. The prospect who will have the biggest impact this year, not just in spring training, but this year, as you are kind of laughing to yourself.
I was going to say Ramos.
Oh, Ramos. Oh, Brian Ramos has ruined your projections.
I'll stick with it. If he's hitting, I think he was, I wouldn't say he was put in a position to fail, but I feel like he was put in a position where his prospect ranking was going to suffer. Prospects get really hyped when you see them dominate, minor league competition. Brian slumped in the start of the year in Double-A, and obviously that's on him. But they didn't want to promote him to the majors. They're really just out of third baseman at that time. They knew it was going to be really difficult for him.
He was in Double-A.
He got the quad injury right after he came back, or when he was with Chicago, and that slowed things down as well. He goes back to Triple-A, and he's taking a while to find feel, and he puts up a half season or more of numbers that really don't look befitting of his talent. It's really like in August, Alan Zinter, the hitting coordinator, made an adjustment with his legs, and he really hit like a good prospect from there on out. He played pretty well in that final week when the White Sox were winning games all of a sudden. If you look at chase rate, in zone miss rate, there's not like, he didn't put up good numbers in the majors, but there's not some red flag in there that's like, oh, he can't play here. He was a 22-year-old. He played at 3 different levels. He kind of held his own in terms of like not having the bat knocked off his shoulder, not making terrible swing decisions. I think he can really play third base when he's healthy, and given an opportunity to stick there. I think he's someone who's pretty much major league ready to probably be like a solid regular. Maybe there's going to be rookie hiccups or elbow soreness that get in the way of that, but I think he's someone who's really kind of been lost in the shuffle in terms of who are the best prospects in this organization, and I think he could put up a 2-win season if he's playing Chicago all year. So I think he has a chance to make the biggest impact. It's all a mystery at this point. And I just want to point out on all those things he did that were difficult last year, passed the citizenship test.
Yes,
at the same time do it. Well, at 22 years of age, I think
knows English. Learned it like 2 years ago.
He learned English from listening to Little Baby. Like I speak English. I can't know everything Little Baby says on record. So
Brian Ramos is a James Fegan all-star.
He's an impressive guy, and I think it's weird because maybe he's been around longer, but like he doesn't have like that new penny feel that a lot of some of the other prospects are. But I think he can hang with everyone else.
And I like all the little things he does on the field. He seems like a smart player, unselfish player. We didn't have a lot of that last year, and so when he came up and did those little things, I'm like, where is this coming from? Brian Ramos. That's what I like about him as well.
Yeah, I think he can play the style of baseball they want. He's not just a power-only guy. He's a pretty good all-around talent. Okay,
here we go. Number 7 burning question. Who gets to the majors first? Will it be Kyle Teel or Edgar Quero?
This is really like, what's that, like, those optical illusions where like you could see like a young woman's face turn, or you could see like an older, like it could really go either way. Like,
yeah, it's a coin flip.
Teel is like a bit older and had a bit more time in AAA, but Quero hit better. Teel is theoretically, he's played in college, but that also like that meant he didn't get to call games that much beforehand going to pro ball. So Edgar's been doing that longer, even though he hasn't turned 22 yet. Edgar probably plays in the majors last year if he doesn't tweak his back.
True.
So I would lean Teel because I think it's a little bit more, experienced, and I think, probably defensively is a little bit more polished. But it could really go either way.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like I'm picking Teel because I don't think Edgar Quero is ready, and I don't think I'd pick Edgar Quero because he hit better in AAA because I think Kyle Teel can't hit. So I think they're really similar. They kind of got in there different ways, but they're both guys that their bat has performed a bit better than you would think versus like looking at them like they're not typical power hitter size. They're both kind of short, stout dudes, but they both perform. They both are going to stick there defensively. Teel with what he's been able to do framing wise the second half of last season, just kind of the way he's talked about as a game manager, it just seems like he's maybe a bit more polished and major league ready, but it could be a difference of weeks, it could be a difference of days, or it could go the other direction.
So come September, are we talking about Teel and Quero both being in the major leagues with a third catcher, or just those two?
I think you could get away with the third catcher certainly September because both of them have hit enough. I'm not saying they're going to be rookies and going to be great DHs, but I think they're enough where you don't sweat them being in the lineup. At a different position necessarily, especially for a developing team that's just trying to get them at bats. Obviously, we're talking about a lot of guys who could be putting claims on DH in September, but I think that certainly could work. And I think a lot of teams recently, for some reason, the 2019 Nats come to mind a lot with, I want to say it was Yan Gomes and Kurt Suzuki, like having two catchers who both catch in like the 70, 80 games territory, who can both, flex out to first base or DH and maybe not lead the league, but be decent offensive contributors. That's a really solid setup. I don't know if that's what it's going to be. I don't know if maybe it sets up for a trade or something else they need longer term, but I don't think like you look in the two catchers and think like, well, which one's going to win and which one gets discarded. I think having two at the top is a solid place to be.
Yeah, I mean, there's Corey Lee, there's Matt Thaiss. Omar Narvaez is here as a non-roster invitee. They are loaded at catcher. We've never had this many catchers at this level, or at least certainly projected to be good, because we don't, Caro and Teal aren't even in the majors yet, but this is the best. I would say, would you say this is the best collection of catching talent other than like having when they had like AJ Brzezinski?
As far as like when I've covered, yeah, I would say so. It's certainly deepest and certainly like the most robust prospect talent. Peak 𝗬𝗏 𝗏 was pretty good in terms of the numbers he put up.
But then like who was behind him? I'm just saying like there's like five guys
there
here.
were those crazy 60 games of McCann and Grandal. Where they
what?
like
You're right.
Split.
That was the best. Okay, so you're right. I'm glad you refreshed my memory from 2020 and 2021.
But you mentioned Narvaez, like
or 2021.
He was a guy that they were working on defensively a lot when he was
Yeah.
here. Had a great year defensively under Walter McKinven with the Brewers. So if there's any of that magic there, that obviously provides a lot of encouragement. And they certainly seem better set up for as far as catching instruction at the major league level to have both 𝗬𝗏 and McKinven on staff than they have.
All right, we got three questions left. Who's going to have the better major league career from the Crochet trade? So we got Braden Montgomery, we got Kyle Teal, we got Chase Mydroth, and Wickelman Gonzalez. Who's going to have the better major league career?
Obviously, there's some risks that, like, tools-wise, if Montgomery, like, hits, he's going to probably blow everyone away. He's got, like, 30 homer power. I don't think he'll play center field, but he could play be like a guy who's really above average in right field, both with range and arm. I have to stay true to my principles as a human, which is valuing catcher defense above all. So I think Teal, being a guy who's kind of lauded as like having great in-game feel, being a really revered teammate, someone who's seen his catching skills like go up really prodigiously in the last 1 to 2 years, seemingly has hit all over up to this point. Those ingredients are there for like a really long career. Like Kyle Teal could be like catching games in the playoffs while we're in the at the senior home for all we know.
Is he going to have a 40-year career?
Yeah.
or maybe not 40, 20, 30. I don't know when I'm going to the senior home.
I was thinking 15-year career, and I make like really horrible like health choices from here on out.
Are you going to the senior home when you're 45 years old, 50 years old? That would not be good for you.
If they'll have me.
All right, we got to change your health habits. If we're you got to get to the senior home at least when you're in your 70s. If you're showing up and you're like 55, you've made some terrible health decisions.
This bottle's full of vodka. I figured I should keep it on the low, but for transparency for the audience.
For all you know, I mean, that's plastic. We don't know what's in there. The plastics these days, I try to stay away from plastic as much as I can, but I'm not perfect.
You think it could lead to something?
It could.
All right.
It could. This is a whole other podcast. We're talking about environmental issues. All right. So your answer is Teal.
I was going Teal. After all that, Wickelman Gonzalez.
So of course it's Wickelman Gonzalez. I'm looking forward to watching him pitch. By the way,
supposed to have big stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. The player no one is talking about right now. No one is talking about, or very few people, other than the nerds like us, but we'll be talking about at the end of camp. Who stands out for you? I'll give you a couple myself, but I want to hear who you think that is just so under the radar right now, and then spring training is going to happen, and fans are going to be like, hey, how about this guy?
All right, well, I can cheat by using that justification.
It's not Brian Ramos.
All right.
Don't go Brian Ramos.
Because by the end of spring, fans are getting so much too concerned about the eighth guy in the bullpen.
Please don't.
𝗏 𝗏 threw 80 innings of sub 2 ERA in AAA last year with it came over in the Jimenez trade. It's like a 91, 94, overpowering, good slider, kind of a finesse lefty, but throws a lot of strikes. It's just gotten people out. Could definitely just pitch well and earn a spot in spring, and be a guy that's like, is the happy story that we're like doing at the end of spring of like, oh, he made a roster. He's guys, I think honestly he's 26. He's worked hard to get here. So I think like the surprise bullpen spot winner is the way I do it.
This is such a James Fegan answer. You're going with the 8th guy in the bullpen. That's going to be the guy everybody's talking about.
That's what everyone's arguing about at the end of spring.
No, come on.
Give me your examples, because
I'll give you one like Mason Adams.
Okay, yeah.
Like there's a guy who like what if he makes the rotation, or you're going to see him in Major League camp facing Major League hitters going, oh, this could be a guy. I mean, not in the bullpen, but as a starting member of your team.
Jim Margulis talks to me about Mason Adams too much for him to be. No one's talking about to me.
I just like when I've watched him pitch. Like he just got a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
He doesn't obviously. He's a pitcher.
Right.
And I'm always curious. Like the guys who are pitchers, all right, don't have, aren't throwing 98. Can he be one of the few who just comes out here as a pitcher and just, I don't say he's going to dominate, but he's going to get a lot of productive outs, and he could catapult his way to Chicago.
Yeah, he's got like 5 pitches. His slider's really good. I don't want to just say like all of it's just making it look the same and changing speeds, but like yeah, he's got a wide array. He throws everything for strikes. He all his pitches tunnel really well. He sneaks up on you. He's a guy like when he came to Chicago, he's walking in the clubhouse and you don't. He's not like George Wolko walking in the clubhouse like that's the one of the prospect. Yeah. He walks up and he starts changing a locker, and you're like, oh, that's a player. Like he kind of sneaks up on you. He's not, towering or anything like that.
Right.
But yeah, he's done nothing to perform. He had a back issue, kind of slow him at AAA. He's probably someone that we're talking about knocking on the door of the majors with what he did last year. If that doesn't happen, so if he's comes out here, he's healthy. He was the real anchor of that Barons rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, Schultz is great, but he's only pitching 4 innings. Like Mason Adams was just like piling up 6-inning starts, less than 2 runs night after night for that team. I really like carried them the first half. So yeah, I think for sure that could happen.
All right, I got one more, and for the casual White Sox fan, you might, follow along, and you'll see a guy who is going to get some run here in spring training. He's kind of a big dude. He's got some power. He can run. And you might not even know his name, although if you listen to this podcast, you've heard me mention it, Wilfred Veras. Like, what if Wilfred Veras, he's like 21 years old, 22 years old. He was in Double-A last year. He didn't get to Triple-A, did he? No, he did not get to Triple-A. That could be a guy. Like, oh, we got this guy on our team?
He's built, like, he's tooled up. He's got a lot of power. He swings pretty hard. He's, he's not, like, going to play a defensive premium position, but he's not unathletic. He can move pretty well for being a big dude. He's certainly the guy you could see hit like a couple huge home runs in Arizona and be like, I don't know what his story is, but I want to see more of that. So the hot months of Wilfred Veras are pretty hot. So I think if he stars here, like, that someone can get some buzz, and someone that the farm system likes and thinks just because the athleticism has potential, even if there's plate discipline, there's chase stuff to work out. As he pointed out, he's really young for how far he's gotten. So yeah.
Okay, our final question. This is the hottest question. How many wins will the White Sox have? Or is more the answer how many losses? Like the wins, you're like, I don't know what the number is going to be. What are the losses? What's that going to be as we enter? I don't know what phase of the rebuild this is going to be, but let's hope it's the next phase. I hope we're like graduating past what was 121 and doing something certainly significant in the loss column.
Certainly, like this should be like you'd hope this is the last year where it's like, all right, one of our core players is playing really well. What can we get for him?
Yeah.
Ideally, Luis is like the last person in that segment, but obviously if Brandon Drury had a big year, then he's probably something you're talking about midseason.
Benintendi could be one of those guys.
Benintendi could be one of those guys. That's a good example. Martin Perez could be one of those guys.
Yeah.
It's probably the design for him to be one of those guys. So obviously, I think more than certainly last year and certainly more than 2023, you're in a situation where, you could lose a lot at the deadline. You could lose some of your top performers, but like you really are expecting a lot of this core group of this roster to be better by the end of this year than they are right now. You could ship out, Martin Perez at the deadline, and it's going to be less, oh God, who makes starts now, or do we have the bullpen game all the time? And a bit more like, all right, now we get to see Mason Adams or Now hey, Nick Nestrini's pitching better. Let's give him a shot. So I think there's a lot more options for them to be interesting and even be better, or maybe a deadline like, hey, Colson Montgomery took his rookie lumps in the first half, but he's really hitting the ball. So
is there a number in here?
We're on the flagship. I want to be positive. Let's say 6-0.
60 wins, 102 losses.
Yeah.
That is an improvement of 19 games. That's
Manager of the year?
Manager of the year.
That
would be the first time in the history of baseball that a manager of the year lost 100 games.
I think if he wins 70, you got to give it to him. That'd be a 29-win swing.
Yeah. He'll get votes.
I've heard nothing but good things about him. I also think he doesn't have to win a lot of games to engineer one of the better 1-year swings.
That's true.
In the league or in recent history.
Yeah. There was so much stacked up against the White Sox from a talent standpoint, from a baseball god standpoint, from, I don't know, just inexplicable losses in so many crazy ways.
That Travis Jankowski was allowed to wear for an inning for some reason?
No. What was that? Andrew Vaughn had a home run.
Those aren't standard.
No, there were way too many of those. So that's good. I think that's 60 and 102 seems like I want your realistic answer, not just because you're on the flagship. I want some honest truth.
All right, 57 then.
You're going to 57. All right, so now 57, and what's the math with that?
105.
105 losses. Okay. All right, thank you. I want your honesty here.
Okay, all right.
That's okay. That's still a big improvement.
I picked them to win 90 games in 2023.
Ouch.
I want to say maybe 70 last year or there above. I've been burned a lot.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I get tagged as a White Sox optimist per se, but I've been made to look a fool in past years.
So you're going the other way. You're going the other way.
I'm trying to be conservative.
Yeah.
I am predicting a 16-win improvement,
which is
not nothing.
That's aggressive, actually. in normal times, that's an aggressive improvement. So, all right, I think last year I said I could see this team winning 60. I could see this team winning 70. And if every single thing went right, they'd win 80. But never in the history of baseball has everything gone right except for maybe the 05
Why
White
didn't
Sox.
You address if everything went wrong? Maybe that's a scenario.
I know, I didn't
we
do
should
that.
Talk about more.
If everything goes wrong this year, I don't want to go to that dark place. That's a really dark place. Because everything went wrong last year. I think everything went wrong last year, and they lost 121. Yeah, I don't want to go there. That's for my mental health and everyone out there. We can't go to that place again. Then if it happens, it happens, and I'll deal with the consequences. That's my approach. If everything goes wrong, they'll lose 130. There it is. Is that the answer you want, James? If everything goes wrong,
I thought I wanted it, but then I heard it and it didn't make me happy at all. I don't want to live through that.
No. So they will not lose 130. That is never going to happen. It is on camera. It is being recorded here. And if it happens, then you guys can just use this forever. And I hope I'm really wrong. So, James Fegan, I think we're going to end the podcast on that. Great to have you here. And and thanks Sox Machine for letting us rent James for this podcast. The check's in the mail.
Thank you to my attorneys, my financial advisor,
your team of agents.
Yeah. Very unselfish play by all of them.
Yeah. Well, listen, read his stuff. Listen to listen to this podcast, obviously, and then listen to the Sox Machine podcast. Subscribe. It's great coverage for the White Sox in good times and bad, right?
Right.
Good for any times. And we've been through all those times in the last 5 or 6 years. So James Fegan here on the White Sox podcast from Arizona. Plenty more podcasts coming your way here over the next 5 or 6 weeks. 𝗦ci 𝗰𝗶𝗹, who I spoke to on the phone just yesterday. Take it away.
All right, Chuck, this edition of the White Sox podcast is over.